What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to Z-Race Central. Today I'm going to be giving an in-depth review of the Elite Avanti Smart Trainer. And I've been riding this trainer ever since November of 2024, and I've had almost a year now riding this trainer, and it has been my primary trainer for the last 7 or so months, and I've just been putting it through all my tests. I've been riding it through all my normal use case, and now I can finally give a full in-depth review of this trainer. And I have a little hint, you guys, it's pretty good. Let's dive into the video. Alright, starting off with some specifications, this trainer comes in at a price of $849 or 749 euros, so it's sort of in that mid-range zone. It's not going to be quite as expensive as something like the Taxneo 2T or the Wahoo KICKR, but it's also not going to be quite as budget-friendly as something like the Wahoo KICKR Core. Now, this trainer is going to have some pretty top-end specs, and that includes plus or minus 1% power accuracy, built-in Wi-Fi connection just in case your Bluetooth connections aren't the most stable. It's going to have 10 Hz race mode, but we'll talk a little bit more about why this isn't actually 10 Hz later on in the video. It's going to have Zwift's virtual shifting. This trainer is technically Zwift ready, which is really cool to see. I'm talking more about why that doesn't exactly live up to the hype a little later in this video too. And it's also got a maximum simulated gradient of 18%, not quite in that 25% range like the Taxneo 2T, but it's still up there with 18%. You're also going to get 2,100 watts of a max resistance, so this is pretty much going to be perfect for anyone who is this trainer, unless you're like a World Tour Pro. Even most World Tour Pros aren't hitting 2,000 watts, so you're going to be pretty much fine from a resistance standpoint. The trainer does, however, have a pretty light flywheel of around 4 kilograms or 8.8 pounds, which is going to play into its realism and how it rides, and I'm going to explain more about that later on in this video. Now, another thing that Elite has implemented are its flex feet. Now, this trainer comes with the black flex feet, meaning it only swivels side to side 4.5 degrees, which they're basically just cushy feet to give you a little bit more movement than the normal hard rubber feet. And you could also upgrade that to the red feet, which I believe gave you 9% of movement back and forth. Now, I didn't really notice this much. I think that something like a rocker plate is going to be much more substantial than these little gains, but I guess it is there if you do find yourself needing that extra movement. Alright, moving on to the setup of this trainer. The setup of the trainer, I gotta say, was pretty darn easy. I just took it straight out of that box over there that this camera is actually mounted on right now. And look at me being resourceful with the box. But I just took it out of the box, spread out the feet, and threw on a cassette. Note that this trainer does not include a cassette. So that means that you're gonna have to go out and buy your own cassette or buy something like a Zwift cog if you want to have something like virtual shifting. I just installed my 10-speed cassette and got my bike on it, and I was ready to go probably within 10 minutes or so. Very, very straightforward setup. Now this sort of brings us into the build quality section, where I'm going to give this trainer a lot of praise. Now this trainer actually has sort of a metallic finish to most parts of it. It's going to be a mix of plastic and metal, and it's got a really, really sturdy handle, which is going to allow you to move this trainer around really easily, and that really helped me get the setup out really easy. I could just pull it straight out of the box. It wasn't awkward or anything like that. There's a lot of trainers that are really awkward to carry around, and this trainer is built really, really strong. I feel really confident riding this trainer. It doesn't feel plasticky like other trainers, like the Elite Diretto, which I'm going to talk about in my other video, but as far as build quality goes, the Avanti shines. It actually doesn't look very bad. A lot of trainers look atrocious, but the Elite Avanti actually looks pretty modern and nice. Now, another specification that I forgot to mention is that this trainer actually can bridge your heart rate and cadence sensor, which means that if you're using something like an Apple TV, which has a device limit, you're going to want something like an Elite trainer because it'll be able to transmit your signals all as one. So if you do decide to use something like virtual shifting or a heart rate monitor or anything like that, you can pair all those devices to your Apple TV. Now, moving on from build quality and on to power accuracy. And power accuracy is another area where Elite's trainers as a whole really shine. Now, Elite's trainers actually have a built-in power meter, which is not very common amongst trainers. Most trainers measure things differently with their trainers, but Elite actually has built-in power meters in pretty much all of their trainers. And this makes their power meters really, really accurate. And I've noticed that these trainers are almost more accurate than my power meter pedals. And that kind of says something. And I haven't had any issues whatsoever with my power accuracy on the Elite Avanti. I've put it through tons of tests. I put it through sprints, races, easy rides, and all through probably 1,000 miles by now, after all I've ridden since November. All right, now on to the ride feel section. Now, ride feel is not the best on the Elite Avanti, and that is partially attributed to the really light flywheel that's included on this trainer. So you're not going to have like really nice inertia like you're going to get on something like the Wahoo KICKR V6 or the Wahoo KICKR Move. Those trainers are going to feel quite a bit better in terms of ride feel, but the Elite Avanti does punch pretty heavy for its light flywheel. So considering it has a pretty light flywheel, I think this trainer performs really well in terms of its ride feel. So I'd say that it's probably middle of the pack towards the upper pack. It's not going to be quite in that Wahoo KICKR or Tacx Neo tier, but it certainly isn't as bad as like a wheel-on trainer. All right, now another hot topic that I want to sort of touch on is virtual shifting. Now, just around a month ago, Elite added virtual shifting to pretty much all of its trainers, and a huge shout out to Elite for doing that, because that is absolutely huge, because other manufacturers like Wahoo only included virtual shifting for like one or two of their trainers, which is a really big bummer because people spent like over $1,000 on this thing and they don't even get virtual shifting. And Elite is literally giving virtual shifting to every single direct drive trainer that they currently manufacture or have manufactured in the last 5 or so years. So that's really cool to see. However, virtual shifting was built more for Wahoo, and it was sort of a collaboration between Wahoo and Zwift to sort of bring this to reality. But since then, Zwift has opened up this protocol to all sorts of trainers. We're seeing Garmin implementing it, we're seeing Elite implement it, we're seeing like Saris working on it apparently, Decathlon has it, JetBlack has it. Pretty much everyone is implementing virtual shifting at this time, and Elite decided not to be left out on that, and they were actually one of the first to try to implement this virtual shifting, but unfortunately it does not work quite as well as it does on a Wahoo trainer. So we've got sort of two main issues here. First of all, the resistance floor is pretty high, so when you're using something like a Zwift ride, it's going to be pretty hard to pedal. If you're just riding like at lower powers, like 100 watts, it's going to be pretty hard. You're going to crank out like 60 RPMs or something like that. Additionally, you're also going to have not that big of a resistance change between the two gears. So say if you're switching from gear like 3 to 4, you're not going to notice that big of a change. The big changes are really biased towards those later gears, like gears 16 to 24. Each of those changes is a lot more substantial than the earlier changes. Also, things are a little delayed with virtual shifting. When you shift, it's not going to be immediate like you're going to see on the Wahoo trainers. You're going to have a bit of a delay, so that is a little bit annoying. However, even despite that, virtual shifting is not a huge thing for most people, and if you're not really interested in virtual shifting, this won't be a problem for you at all. It is still an amazing trainer. Now for the tricky part, and that's should you buy this trainer? Now I've been riding this trainer, as I said, for several months now, and I've tried a ton of trainers out there. I've tried Wahoo's trainers, I've tried Zwift Hub, I've tried Tacx trainers, I've tried pretty much every single type of trainer, and I gotta say, the Elite Avanti is a pretty impressive trainer. Now, whether it's quite worth the price, that's a bit of a different story, because JetBlack pretty much offers everything that Elite offers in a $399 trainer. Yeah, that's a bit tricky, because why would you want to spend $399 when you could spend, or why would you want to spend $849 when you could spend $399 on a very similar trainer? And here's the thing, a lot of the JetBlack Volt trainers or the JetBlack Victory trainers are not in stock pretty much anywhere. You're gonna have to wait like probably 6 months to get your trainer, whereas Elite's trainers are currently on the shelves and you can go out to a store and go buy one right now. And that makes things a lot more accessible, especially if you're gearing up for the indoor cycling season. You're gonna wanna get your trainer ready in time, rather than having to wait months and months and months, not knowing whether there's gonna be a delay, whether things aren't just not gonna work out, whether they're gonna end up raising prices due to tariffs, everything like that. It's a whole complex situation. So if you're looking to get your trainer pretty soon and you're not willing to wait for the JetBlack trainer, then the Elite Avanti is gonna be a better choice for you. The Elite Avanti is also a great choice if you have Apple TV, because you're gonna need that Bluetooth bridging, and that's a really, really handy feature. Now, when comparing the Elite Avanti to something like the Wahoo KICKR Core, you would want to buy the Elite Avanti if you're looking for some more modern features, and that includes things like Wi-Fi, an odometer, heart rate bridging. Those kinds of features are a lot more modern features that something like the Wahoo KICKR Core doesn't quite have. Now, if you have any buying guide tips or anything like that that you'd like, please leave a comment in the comment section below and I will be sure to give you some advice. But that just about wraps up the video. All in all, the Elite Avanti is a very solid trainer if it fits your needs. And with that, thank you all for watching, ride on, and see you on the next one.